Hi, how you doing? This video has quite an exciting sponsor. I'll tell you more about that later. In this video, we're going to talk about starting a business. We're going to talk about going shopping. We're going to talk about dangerous shortcuts. But most importantly, we're going to talk about how we all mess up sometimes. There's a thing called a heuristic process or heuristic technique, which is effectively a shortcut taken by your subconscious mind in order to prevent you from having to go through a long and drawn-out conscious decision-making process. We're not going to go into huge amounts of detail on these. If you want to know more, then I thoroughly recommend the works of Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. But understanding how these heuristics exist and how they enable us to make decisions and do things can be hugely helpful when trying to learn a complex physical skill, like fighting. In essence, the list of heuristics in human decision-making is pretty much infinite. You're probably very well acquainted with some of them, like the familiarity heuristic, that basically states that people tend to choose things that are familiar rather than the things that are objectively better. It's why Google retargeting is an effective advertising strategy. It's why fast food restaurants are so popular despite not actually being that good. And it's why, when you get a takeout, you always look at the menu, but then you always order the same thing anyway. It doesn't take a genius to understand how we developed that one. It makes perfect sense for your ancestors long ago to have stuck to foods they were familiar with and knew to be safe, rather than risking the ones that might be better, but also might kill them. Anyway, I digress. We're not looking at the familiarity heuristic, however interesting it might be. It's worth saying at this point that there are both positive and negative heuristics, and we're going to look at one of the more negative ones. We're going to look at the sunk cost fallacy. In summary, the sunk cost fallacy is when we make decisions about the future based on the cost to us in the past. A sunk cost is, in effect, anything that has a cost to us that we can't get back. It can be money that we've spent, it can be time, it can be a favour from a friend, or it can be physical effort. Let's look at an example. Let's say you have a great idea for a software business. There's an annoying problem, and you've come up with a really clever way to solve that problem using an app, only the app doesn't exist. You have to build it. You put your savings into getting a very rough proof of concept up and running, and then using that, you secure a decent amount of investment to turn it into a fully functioning product. All pretty standard so far. You hire a team of developers and designers. You spend a lot of time and money getting it to the point where you can test it in the real world. Only when you do, it turns out the testers don't respond particularly well. They certainly don't respond the way you were hoping. It seems that either your solution isn't that attractive, or maybe the problem itself isn't really an issue to them. At this point, you have to make a decision. Do you finish the product and launch it to try and recoup some of the money you've spent, or do you go back to the drawing board and effectively start again? You might think that the best option is to push ahead and finish it, but that would be because you're basing the decision on the sunk costs already poured into the business, and not the best way to make a success of it in the future. The pressure from these sunk costs is so powerful it can be hard to be truly objective, even when we're talking about a completely fictional company. So let's try a different example. It's a beautiful morning. You wake up and the sunlight sneaking through the gaps in the curtains. You can see little motes of dust suspended in the air. Birds are singing outside in the trees. You head downstairs to make yourself a nice cup of coffee, only to find that you're out of coffee. Never mind, you say to yourself. Determined not to let this spoil what's clearly going to be a beautiful day, you throw some clothes on and head outside to walk to the shop to buy some more coffee. It's not that far. The walk will do you good. Only when you've been walking for a little while and you're about 3/4 of the way there, you realise it's Sunday and the shop isn't open today. At this point, do you keep walking to the shop? Well, no, obviously not. The effort you've put into getting there isn't relevant. Going to the shop is not going to help you solve your lack of coffee. You go to a different shop, or you go home, or you just accept there'll be no coffee yet and walk somewhere else enjoying the sunshine. It would be crazy to keep walking to a shop you know for certain is closed to get coffee you know for certain you can't actually get. But this is what we do all the time. It's why we keep watching a movie we aren't enjoying. It's why we listen to the phone ringing at the other end, knowing full well no one's going to pick it up. It's why we stay in relationships that don't make us happy. It's why people in HEMA stick to interpretations of sources that they've had for years, despite those interpretations being shown to make no sense. And this is where it finally gets relevant to combat sports. It's why we stick to strategies or techniques that clearly aren't working when we fight. Whether it's leading with that jab, cross, kick combo that you identified would be really effective when it's only getting you taken down, whether it's holding onto your armbar attempt for dear life when you can feel them about to escape, or whether it's shooting for another outside single when you got guillotined the last 2 times because you've been practicing it for months. It's also why people continue to train in a martial art they know isn't actually that effective. They go into it with the full expectation of learning how to fight effectively, and sometime later, despite realising that it just isn't delivering that, they keep on training. Which leads me beautifully onto this video's sponsor, which is Your Fighting Chance. When I first trained with Billy Robinson, I met a guy by the name of Danny Mitchell. He was clearly a skilled fighter, and it rapidly became clear he was a professional. He was there looking to up his already pretty impressive game. He's fought on a bunch of UK promotions, including BAMMA, in both the UFC and Bellator. He's a wrestler, a striker, and a 3rd degree BJJ black belt. He retired from fighting in 2017 and now coaches full-time, and is producing some fantastic fighters. Recently, he's created an online course for people who want to learn genuinely effective fighting skills. Your Fighting Chance is a 90-day program designed to take you from absolute beginner to a pretty solid fighter with a great foundation. It covers everything you need from stance and movement through to strength and conditioning. It even has sections on recovery and getting the most from your training. As you would expect, it has great instructional videos on striking and grappling. Danny's kindly agreed to let me offer a discount to you guys, so if you go to englishmartialarts.com/fightingchance, that'll redirect you to the sign-up page, and when you're there, sign up using the code EnglishMartialArts and you'll get 10% off the price of the course. If you're a beginner to combat sports, or you've been mainly focused on some of the more obscure or esoteric arts, and you want to try something brutally effective, you won't find a better online course than this. So thank you to Danny and to Your Fighting Chance for sponsoring this video. Anyway, let's get back to the main subject. The fact is that you don't have to have been fighting for long to have come across a situation where you can look back and see that it was your decision to push on with something that caused the problem. And that's okay. That is, after all, what training is for. Getting ourselves to recognise the point where we have to change strategy before it causes us a problem. The sunk cost fallacy is simply the hurdle we have to overcome in order to do that. And understanding how it works is often the biggest step towards stopping it being an issue. That being said, sometimes even understanding it doesn't help. If you've done BJJ for any length of time, you're probably as familiar as I am with the relationship between a triangle, an armbar and an omoplata. But that doesn't mean that you don't regularly realise you've missed the opportunity to switch because you were too focused on the one you were trying for, despite never really being in a position to finish it. That's the sunk cost fallacy in action. So now, over to you. Were you already familiar with the sunk cost fallacy? Is it something you've come across in your own training, or is it a completely new concept to you? If so, does it shine a light on some things that might have been going wrong in your own training? Stick something in the comments and let me know. And to those of you still here at the very end of the video, fight team!